I found out I was fired before I even reached the baggage claim. My phone vibrated while I was still standing near the gate. Suitcase handle in my hand. Wedding checklist open in my notes. The sender was my boss, Martin Hale, not human resources, not a meeting invite, just an email. I opened it without thinking, already planning to text my fiancé about the cake tasting later that afternoon. The subject line read, "You're fired, congrats." That was it. No greeting, no explanation. Inside the email was a single sentence confirming my termination, effective immediately, followed by a smiling emoji spelled out in words, like a joke someone expected me to laugh at. I stared at the screen until the letters stopped making sense. A woman beside me said, "Excuse me." Nudging past with her carry-on, I stepped aside automatically. My hands were steady. That part scared me more than the email. I called Martin. Straight to voicemail. I called human resources. A recorded message told me their office hours. I hung up before it finished. "I'm Sierra. I was 32 years old. Getting married in 3 days. And until 5 minutes ago, I was the senior systems licensing lead at a mid-sized tech firm in downtown Seattle. I had worked there for 6 years. I had trained half the department. I had built the licensing framework their entire operation depended on. I should have cried. I should have called my fiancé. I should have sat down. Instead, I opened my laptop. "Are you okay?" a man asked as he passed. Noticing my face, "I'm fine," I said, and surprised myself by meaning it. My inbox started updating. Internal alerts, automated system notifications. Everything still recognized me. They had fired me, but they had forgotten something important. I logged in. That was the moment I stopped being surprised and started being careful. The story you are about to hear is a fictional work created by the writing team at RevengeAITA. Names, companies, events, and outcomes are crafted for dramatic storytelling purposes, while inspired by real workplace dynamics. This narrative is not intended to represent any actual person or organization. Each story carries its own message and stands on its own. By the time I closed my laptop, my phone began buzzing again. This time, it was not silence on the other end. Chapter 2 began before I even left the airport. By the time I reached the rideshare pickup area, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text. "Lena, did you see the email?" Lena worked 2 desks down from me. We'd survived late nights together. Coffee runs, deadlines that kept sliding closer without warning. I typed back, "Me yes." 3 dots appeared, disappeared. Then came another message, "Lena, I think this was planned." I stopped walking. I called her instead. She answered immediately, her voice low and tight. "They knew you were landing this morning." I leaned against a column, laptop bag heavy on my shoulder. "What do you mean?" "Knew they were talking about it yesterday. Martin asked Eat to confirm your flight time." "That doesn't make sense," I said. "I was on approved leave." "I know," she said quickly. "That's why it felt wrong," he said. "Once she's back in Seattle, we move." Those were his words. I closed my eyes for a second, then opened them. "Move how?" "She didn't say it out loud," Lena said. "But they cleared your calendar, reassigned your onboarding session, and they had Evan sitting in your chair this morning." Evan, fresh hire. Nice enough. No experience with enterprise licensing frameworks. I had trained him for 2 weeks. "They told him I resigned," Lena added. I let out a short laugh that didn't sound like humor. "Of course they did." "Sierra," she said, hesitating, "you know the system better than anyone. They think once you're gone, it's theirs." "They fired me before my wedding," I said quietly. "On purpose." "Yes," she said. "I'm sorry." I ended the call and stared at my phone. Senior Systems Specialist wasn't a title they gave lightly. I had designed the licensing structure that kept every department running, from sales validation to internal access control. Nothing major moved without touching my work. They didn't fire me because I was replaceable. They fired me because they thought I was done. My phone rang again. This time it was Martin. I watched it ring until it stopped. Then I opened my laptop and checked the internal dashboard. Everything was still live, every permission intact. Every system responding to my credentials. They hadn't rushed. They had assumed. And that told me exactly how this was going to unfold. I pulled up my original employment contract while the ride crawled through traffic. The document was dated 6 years earlier, back when I had been grateful just to be offered a seat in the building. I remembered Martin sliding the folder across the table and saying, "It's standard, you can skim it later." I hadn't skimmed. I had read every line that night, sitting on my couch with a legal pad and a highlighter. Back then, I had asked one question. So who owns what I build? I'd said. Martin had looked annoyed. Anything you make here belongs to the company. That's not what this says, I replied. Tapping the page. This clause separates assigned work from independent architecture. He waved it off. It's boilerplate. No one enforces that. I do, I said, and I didn't smile. That clause was still there. Same language, same protection. It stated clearly that any licensing frameworks, authorization systems, or modular infrastructure developed outside direct written assignment remain my intellectual property unless transferred by separate agreement. There was no separate agreement. I scrolled further, opening my internal documentation. Sales verification ran through my licensing server. Logistics automation checked permissions against my code. Even internal employee tools depended on keys I had designed and maintained. A message popped up on my screen. Martin, we need to talk. I ignored it. Another followed. Martin, this is getting complicated. I laughed softly. Complicated was what he called things, once they were no longer simple for him. I remembered my first year there, how a senior engineer had said, "You're thorough, almost too thorough." I remembered being told I worried too much about ownership, about boundaries, about worst-case scenarios. "You think like someone who doesn't trust us," he'd said. "I think like someone who plans to still be standing," I answered. I closed the contract and leaned back. The company had built their growth on systems they never fully understood, created by someone they never thought would push back. They hadn't fired an employee. They had cut access to the one person who knew exactly where every lever was, and exactly which ones still belonged to her. I opened the licensing console and hovered my cursor over the permissions tab. I didn't rush. I read each permission line the same way I always had, carefully, deliberately. Sales validation, order routing, internal access authentication. Each module tied back to the same licensing authority, mine. My phone lit up again. Martin, Sierra, answer me. I muted it. Another message appeared, this one from Human Resources. HR. There seems to be a misunderstanding. Please contact us immediately. A misunderstanding would have been an apology. This was panic wearing polite language. I clicked into the licensing console and selected the primary authorization group. A warning banner appeared on the screen, clear and precise, outlining exactly what would happen if access was revoked. It listed departments, dependencies, consequences. I didn't hesitate. I revoked the licenses. No data was erased. No files were corrupted. I didn't touch a single line of company-owned code. I simply withdrew permission for systems to authenticate against my framework. The dashboard refreshed. Within seconds, error notifications began stacking in the activity log. Sales authorization failed. Internal tools timed out. Automated workflows paused mid-process, waiting for credentials that no longer resolved. My phone rang. I watched the name flash on the screen and let it go dark. Another call followed, then another. The silence between them shrank fast. A new message came in from Lena. "Lena, what did you do?" I typed back slowly. "Me," I took back what was mine. There was a long pause before her reply. "Lena." Everything just froze. "I know," I said out loud, though she couldn't hear me. A voicemail notification appeared from Martin. Then another. The tone shifted even through text. "Martin, this isn't funny." I closed the console and logged out completely. My credentials disconnected cleanly, like a door shutting without a slam. The calls kept coming, not just from Martin now, numbers I didn't recognize, extensions from inside the building. I set my phone face down on the seat beside me and exhaled for the first time since the gate. This wasn't revenge. Revenge was emotional. This was structural. It was the consequence of treating access like ownership and people like placeholders. Somewhere downtown, screens were filling with error messages. Meetings were stopping mid-sentence. Someone was saying my name out loud for the first time that day with something close to fear, and they still didn't know how deep it went. The first voicemail came from Martin. His voice was tight, clipped, still trying to sound in control. "Sierra, whatever this is, you need to reverse it immediately. You don't have the authority to." The message cut off when he ran out of time. The second voicemail was longer. "This is affecting sales. We have teams locked out. Call me now." Then the emails started stacking up faster than I could read the subject lines. Operations order processing has stopped across 3 regions. Sales director. Our accounts cannot verify licenses. Clients are calling. Finance revenue recognition is frozen. I didn't reply to any of them. My phone rang again. This time it wasn't Martin. It was a number I recognized from the executive floor. I let it ring until it stopped. A message appeared from Lena. Lena. They just pulled everyone into the main conference room, I typed back. Me. What are they saying? Her response came seconds later. Lena. At first they said it was a glitch. Then they said it was a security incident. Now they're asking who still has your contact information. Another call came through. I answered this one. Sierra, said a man I barely knew. Daniel from sales leadership. His voice shook. Our biggest retail client can't place their weekly order. They're threatening to cancel if this isn't fixed today. I'm not available, I said evenly. You can't just walk away, he snapped, then softened immediately. We need your help. You fired me, I replied, effective immediately. There was silence on the line. Then, we didn't think I know, I said, and ended the call. I opened the system logs again. Authorization requests were failing in waves, automated retries, escalations, alerts triggering other alerts. The infrastructure was doing exactly what it was designed to do when access was revoked. My phone buzzed again, a text from Martin this time. No title, no pretense. Martin, please, we can talk terms. The word please looked wrong coming from him. I set the phone down and watched the timestamps roll forward. Every minute of silence stretched tighter than the last. Somewhere in that building, authority was cracking, and panic was taking its place. The first legal email arrived just after noon. It wasn't subtle. Legal department, your actions constitute unauthorized interference with company operations. Restore access immediately to avoid further consequences. I read it once and set it aside. 10 minutes later, Human Resources tried a different approach. HR, there appears to have been a miscommunication regarding your termination. We would like to clarify a few points. I laughed. A short sound that surprised me. Miscommunication did not come with a termination notice, and a smiling emoji spelled out like a punchline. Martin called again. This time I answered. Sierra, he said quickly, too quickly. Let's get on a call and clear this up. I don't do calls anymore, I replied. You're making a mistake, he said. This could get serious. It already did, I said. The moment you hit send, he exhaled hard. Look. HR acted without full context. They sent the email you approved, I said. With your name on it. That emoji was unprofessional, he said. I'll admit that. I closed my eyes for a moment. I could see it clearly. The way it had sat at the end of the sentence, smug and casual. You didn't fire me by accident, I said. And you didn't forget to call. You chose not to. Silence. I'm willing to fix this, he said finally. We can reinstate you. Same title, same pay? I'm not interested, I replied. What do you want then, he asked. Frustration bleeding through. Everything in writing, I said. No calls, no verbal promises, no threats. He scoffed. You're holding the company hostage. I'm holding my property, I said. You're reacting to the consequences. Another pause. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Please, he said. Just restore access while we talk. That word again, please. It landed flat. I ended the call and forwarded the legal email to a folder I had labeled documentation. Then I opened a blank document and began outlining terms, calmly, line by line. They had stopped trying to intimidate me. Now they were trying to soften the edges, rewrite the story, pretend respect had always been there. It hadn't. And until they understood that, nothing was moving. The first confirmation came from Lena late that afternoon. They lost Northline, she said without preamble. I held the phone tighter. Northline had been with the company longer than I had. A steady contract, predictable volume, the kind of client executives bragged about during quarterly calls. They pulled out completely. Lena continued. No pause, no extension. They cited operational instability. I closed my eyes. That was processing when access dropped. Yes, she said. Martin promised them it would be resolved within hours. It wasn't. There was shouting in the background on her end. Voices overlapping, sharp and panicked. Someone said Martin's name with open anger. Are you safe? I asked. I'm fine, she replied. But things are changing fast. The board is here. That got my attention. She lowered her voice. They called an emergency session. Legal, compliance, external auditors. They're reviewing everything tied to the licensing framework. And Martin, I said. He's not in the room anymore, she said. He was asked to step out. I didn't smile. I didn't feel relief either. Just a quiet confirmation settling into place. An hour later, an unfamiliar name appeared in my inbox. Board Liaison. We are conducting an internal review regarding recent executive decisions. Please preserve all communications related to your termination. That was it. No threats, no demands, just procedure. Another message followed. This one forwarded from an internal thread Lena had access to. Interim operations. All decisions related to systems access will be handled externally until further notice. Martin's name was nowhere on the chain. The company hadn't collapsed. Not yet, but something essential had cracked. The illusion that everything was under control. The belief that removing one person wouldn't ripple outward. They hadn't planned for scrutiny. They hadn't planned for consequences that couldn't be undone with a quick call or a rewritten narrative. Later that evening, Martin tried once more. Martin? This has gone too far. I stared at the message and felt nothing. It hadn't gone far at all. It had gone exactly where it was always headed. The moment they decided to turn a dismissal into a joke and assumed the foundation beneath them would hold. The damage was no longer theoretical. It was documented, observed, irreversible. And for the first time since the email, the silence that followed felt different. The email from the board arrived just before evening. It wasn't from Martin. It wasn't from Human Resources. It came from someone named Claire Whitman, interim counsel, introduced with a title that didn't invite argument. Claire, we would like to resolve this matter promptly. Please outline your conditions. I read it twice, then opened the document I had been refining all day. I didn't write angrily. I didn't write defensively. I wrote precisely. I replied within 10 minutes. Me first. A written acknowledgement that my termination was wrongful and executed during approved leave. This acknowledgement must be signed by the company and placed in my personnel file. No hedging, no softened language. Me second, financial compensation for damages caused by the termination, including lost income, reputational harm, and disruption immediately preceding my wedding. I paused, then continued. Me third, an ongoing licensing agreement for the continued use of my proprietary systems. Terms will reflect market value and will be administered through counsel. I did not mention forgiveness. I did not mention reconciliation. My phone rang. I let it ring. A moment later, a message appeared from Martin, forwarded through Claire. Martin. This is excessive. I replied only to her. Me, these are the terms. Minutes passed. Then more. Another email arrived. Claire, would you consider restoring partial access during negotiations? I answered calmly. Me. No. Access will be restored once terms are accepted in writing. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument. I imagined the room where they were reading my email, the way my words removed every option except agreement or loss. Lena texted me quietly. Lena, they're arguing. Not about you. About who approved the firing. That told me everything. I received one last message from Claire near the end of the hour. Claire, the board is reviewing your proposal. I closed my laptop and set it aside. There was nothing more to add. No leverage left to reveal. I had not raised my voice once. I had not threatened. I had not begged. For the first time since this began, the outcome was no longer in my hands. It was in theirs. And the cost of refusing was finally clear. The agreement arrived just after dawn. It was concise, signed, final. Claire, the board accepts all stated terms. Please confirm restoration timeline. I read the attached documents slowly. The acknowledgement was there, plain and unambiguous. Wrongful termination during approved leave. The compensation terms were outlined in full, including coverage for the disruption caused in the days leading up to my wedding. The licensing agreement followed, structured, enforceable, and administered through counsel. No loopholes, no favors. Another email followed, this one marked internal but forwarded intentionally. Board liaison effective immediately. Martin Hale is terminated for executive misconduct. I sat with that for a moment. There was no satisfaction in it. Just wait. Consequence finally landing where it belonged. Lena called me a few minutes later. They announced it this morning. She said, security walked him out. No speech, no goodbye email. And human resources, I asked. They're rewriting policies, she said. Termination approvals, leave protections, executive oversight. It's all being audited. I closed my eyes briefly, then opened the licensing console. I restored access exactly as outlined in the agreement. Step by step. Verification logs clean. Dependencies resolving one by one. Systems began responding again, cautiously at first, then fully. Orders resumed. Internal tools unlocked. The company started breathing on its own. Claire emailed once more. Claire access confirmed. Thank you for your cooperation. I logged out and removed my credentials permanently. An hour later, another message came in from the board. Board liaison. You are welcome to return under revised leadership if you choose. I did not reply. I forwarded everything to my attorney, closed the laptop, and stood up. The company would survive. It would continue, smaller and more careful, marked by what had happened. I would not be part of that story anymore. I packed away the last of the documents and turned my attention back to the life waiting for me. The one that had been interrupted but not taken. What remained was mine, and I was done explaining it. The morning of my wedding, my phone buzzed once. It was a calendar alert I had set months earlier, cake tasting. 2 o'clock. I smiled and cleared it. Nothing else demanded my attention. No emergency calls, no crisis emails. The noise had finally stopped. Ready, my fiancé asked, adjusting his tie. His voice was steady. The way it had been through all of this. I said, and meant it. Later that week, after the last thank you notes were sealed, I took a call I had been waiting for. The woman on the line introduced herself as Mara Collins, head of platform strategy at a firm I had admired for years. We reviewed your work, she said, and the way you handled your exit. I didn't interrupt. We want you, she continued, but only if the terms are yours. They are, I said. I don't work without clear boundaries. Good, Mara replied. Neither do we. The offer arrived that afternoon. Senior role, written protections, clear ownership language, a schedule that respected life outside work. I signed without hesitation on the 1st of the next month. A transfer confirmation appeared in my inbox. The licensing fee from my former company, processed automatically, exactly as agreed. The amount was fair, the timing precise, no messages attached. Lena texted me later. They're careful now, she wrote. Everything goes through legal, no shortcuts. Good, I typed back. A week after I started my new role, a junior engineer hesitated before speaking up in a meeting. I waited. I think there's a risk here, she said quietly. Say it? I told her. We're listening. She did. And the room shifted in a way I recognized. Respect settling into place. I didn't destroy a company. I forced one to look at itself, then stepped aside. The life I built after that was quieter, sturdier, and entirely mine.